What a week. First, we learned China's taking over as the #1 economic power in the world. Then we learned the administration may have misled the public on Benghazi. To top it all off, we found out only 67% of Obamacare enrollees have actually paid for coverage. Well, tonight on Cavuto, if the White House thinks this job report is going to erase all that, they may have another thing coming. Welcome, everybody. I'm David Asman, in for Neil tonight. All day, we've been hearing everybody just about celebrate those new jobs numbers. But we're digging in and finding out things aren't as great as a lot of Democrats are making them out to be. Sure, the unemployment rate dropped dramatically to 6.3%, but that's because less people are looking for work, a lot less people. To Swiss America's Chairman Craig Smith now on why this is nothing to celebrate. Craig, thank you for coming in. What do you think of the numbers?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, David. These numbers, look, it wasn't a bad report, but it's not a good report. We increased the participation rate by, or decreased it by 806,000 jobs. And look, if we keep on this path that we're on, participation rate, if you get it down to 10%, we'll have zero unemployment. These numbers are ridiculous. Goodhart's law is kicking in now. We're using data points to dictate policy, and that means the data point is no longer of any value. So to say politically that this president has brought the unemployment rate down to 6.3%, the best level since the Lehman collapse in 2008, may play well politically, but it's doing nothing to help this economy. And if our viewers don't realize that the first quarter of 2014 with a 0.1%, and that's 0.1% growth in GDP, isn't a harbinger of bad things to come, I don't know what is. I've never heard more blame for weather in my life as it relates to economics, as if no other president has ever had a bad winter.
Well, actually, even the Federal Reserve Board came out and said, look, the bad stuff isn't just about the weather. But, Craig, hang in there. I want to bring in our Fox Biz All-Stars. We've got Charlie Gasparino, Lori Rothman, and Gary B. Smith. Wonderful to see you. So, Charlie, the labor force participation rate, to get to Craig's point, is back down to 1978 levels. There were 800,000 people just kind of disappeared.
And I remember pumping gas in 1978 with lines around the block. Right. We had oil crises and gas shortages. You were pumping gas? I did that sort of stuff. I will point this out. Why is the bond market up today? The bond market's up today, and with yields going down on an allegedly bullish, news cycle, it's up because there are sophisticated investors out there that are saying, you know what, this isn't as good as you think. Wages are essentially flat. People are dropping out of the workforce. Yes, there's some good here, but this still is a very slow growth economy. So slow that, a blip in one direction, a really bad, something bad like a shock in Europe or China or something happening somewhere else could send us back to a recession.
Wow, that is very important stuff. But I'm wondering, Lori, when the American people look at this number, they see the overall number going down to 6.3%. Will they buy in to the White House message that this is all good?
No, we're smarter than that, right, David?
I would hope so.
Jobs were created, but they're not quality jobs. Manufacturing was disappointing. Tech jobs are disappointing. It's, again, the quality of jobs. And Americans are finding that they're actually having to move to even have any kind of opportunity at all. So, yes, the unemployment situation may be moving in the right direction, but it's really quality over quantity, and we're not seeing that.
And Gary B., all those folks, those 800,000 people, I mean, this is I think the second largest drop in labor participation rate that we've seen in years.
Exactly, David. I wonder why they keep using this unemployment number. It's almost like a propaganda number. Why don't you just say it's 5%, 4%? Make it up, because it really doesn't matter to the average American. To Charlie's point, we are one government-mandated program away from a recession. If you look at the GDP report from Thursday, healthcare was the only sector that was up because we have this forced march into it. My gosh, if we didn't do that, we would have probably seen GDP go down, and then we're probably one quarter away from a recession.
Well, Craig, let's talk about that. The fact that we lost that title of #1 economy.
Yeah, but that's a dubious measure.
Okay, but the fact is we all agree on, we could be growing a lot faster than we are growing. How do we get back into it, Craig? Because there are a lot of businesses that could grow if they were just given the right incentives.
Oh, indeed. And look, we have to abandon this whole thought of command and control economies. I mean, the Fed is dictating policy, thinking they're making things better. In my opinion, they're making things worse.
How? How specifically are they making things worse?
Well, for instance, you know, increasing their balance sheet to $3 trillion. And
I think it's actually, forgive me, I think it's actually 4.1 trillion, but, you know, a trillion here, a trillion there.
A trillion here, a trillion there, you know, what's the difference at this point? But there could be things that are done, and I'd be curious to know how Charlie feels about this.
Well, let's ask him.
The four major banks are bigger than they were before. I think they're in more trouble than they were before. I don't think Jamie Dimon has a clue the risk that he's playing with right now.
Well,
and I think we're one headline away from disaster.
Well, I will say this. I agree with, you know, it was interesting. I had a conversation almost 2 years ago this day with Jamie Dimon, and, you know, it was when the London whale thing, that trading snafu occurred. Some people would say a scandal, that he didn't have any idea just how bad it was. And he called me up and he said, you know, this wasn't, we screwed up here, Charlie. And I said, listen, he said, but it's not illegal. I don't think we did anything illegal, but we just missed it. I said, your problem isn't whether you do anything illegal, Jamie. You're running a bank that you, being the best guy, can't manage. Nobody can manage. They should break it up. And we should point out that I think it was Bank of America this week who came out and said, oh, whoops, we didn't value our portfolio right, our mortgage-backed securities right, and they had to do a restatement. I mean, these banks are way too big, and here's the downside of these things being too big. You face much more capital requirements. You don't lend out the money that the Fed is printing, and I think that's having a drag on the economy.
The money just sits there in the bank. Hold on a second. I want to get Lori in here because she's too young to remember 1970. Charlie and I remember 1978. You were pumping gas. I was looking for a job. But there was a general malaise in this country at the end of the Carter administration. People just didn't see any chance for real growth in the economy. We had this phrase, limits to growth, no matter what we did. But then we had Ronald Reagan come in, and suddenly it was Good Morning America. Is it possible that the darkest hour right now is just before dawn?
Boy, that's a great point and an interesting perspective, right? Because we've had this sluggish growth economy now since the end of the, well, can we even say we're at the end of the financial crisis? Since the financial crisis began, and, you know, we cheer at 2% overall economic growth. The GDP, the first take on the first quarter, was a huge surprise, disappointment, but we're almost just used to this sluggish growth and this lackluster crisis-level job situation. It's the new normal, if you will. I think we're overusing that phrase.
I don't think we're used to it. There are protests in all these cities. I mean, I don't like these Occupy Wall Street kids, but they're out of work. They got nothing to do. They're not making a lot of money.
Some of them are union guys being paid by the union, by the way. That is their work.
No, they are being organized by unions. That is true. I've been down there, and I reported on that. But mainly, these are kids without any jobs.
And they're moving home with mom and dad, so they're happy with it.
It is a scary
situation. I like to think we're on the edge, that, again, the darkest hour is just before the dawn. Maybe I'm Pollyanna, but what the heck? I'll live with that title. Craig Smith, thank you very much. Good to see you. I appreciate you coming by.
Good seeing you.
Companies saving big under